I was never meant to be loved, just a servant, invisible. Until the crown prince looked at me and everything changed. They hated me for it. His betrothed smiled, then pushed me into the water and watched me drown. He saved me, the one man forbidden to touch someone like me. That night, I gave in. One night where I was his and he was mine. But I was dying, so I ran, unaware I was carrying his children. They became my strength, my reason to live. For 9 years, I hid them, loved them. Then I let them go. When it was too late, he came. The monks kept him out, but he stood in the rain for me. And when I was finally in his arms again, he promised we'd watch the sunrise. But I knew it was my last breath. I'm Cheonsa, and this is the story of how I loved, ran, and died with the Emperor's name in my heart. The palace was made of wood and stone and secrets. It sat in the heart of the kingdom like a jewel in a box, so beautiful that people traveling from faraway villages would stop just to stare at its curved roofs and painted walls. Inside those walls lived the royal family, their advisors, their guards, and hundreds of servants who made sure everything ran smoothly from sunrise to sunset. Cheonsa was one of those servants. She was 21 years old, which felt both young and old depending on the day. Young because she still remembered being a little girl. Old because she had been working in the palace since she was small enough to hide behind a water bucket. She had no family name. Most people in the kingdom had one. It told you who their grandfather was, which village they came from, whether they owned land or raised chickens or knew how to read. Cheonsa just had her first name, which meant angel. Someone at the orphanage had given it to her because they thought it sounded nice. She liked it well enough, even though she did not feel much like an angel most days. What made Cheonsa different from everyone else in the palace was her skin. It was dark brown, the color of rich earth after rain. In a kingdom where most people had lighter skin, she stood out like a single black bird in a flock of white doves. Some people stared. Some people whispered. Some people pretended not to see her at all, which somehow felt worse than the staring. But Cheonsa had learned long ago that she could not control what people thought when they looked at her. She could only control how she moved through the world. So she moved with her back straight and her hands busy and a soft song on her lips. The song was the only thing her mother had left her. Cheonsa did not remember her mother's face or the sound of her voice speaking, but she remembered the melody. It was gentle and slow, the kind of song that made you feel safe even when the world was not particularly safe at all. She hummed it while she scrubbed floors. She hummed it while she carried water. She hummed it while she folded the royal family's clothing into neat squares that smelled like lavender and sunshine. The other maids had started humming it too, though they did not know where it came from. Music has a way of spreading like that, jumping from person to person until everyone has forgotten who sang it first. Cheonsa's favorite people in the entire palace were the Halmionis. That was what everyone called them. It meant grandmothers, though they were grandmothers to the whole kingdom, not just their own families. These women were old and sharp and absolutely terrifying when they wanted to be. They had served in the palace for so long that even the emperor's father treated them with respect. Some of them were physicians who knew which herbs would cure a fever and which ones would put you to sleep for 3 days straight. Some of them were advisors who had seen 5 different emperors come and go. All of them had opinions, and they shared those opinions loudly and frequently, whether anyone asked for them or not. The Halmionis loved Cheonsa. They had loved her from the moment she arrived at the palace as a skinny, scared child who barely spoke. They fed her extra rice when she looked too thin. They scolded her when she worked too hard. They taught her which plants were safe to touch and which government officials were safe to trust, which was a shorter list than the plants. when other servants whispered cruel things about the girl who looked different. The Halmiones would appear out of nowhere like guardian spirits and stare at the whisperers until they found somewhere else to be. In a palace that often felt cold and dangerous, the Halmiones were warm. They were home. So when the new assignment letters were posted on the kitchen wall and all the other maids went pale and quiet, Cheonsa knew something bad was coming even before she read her own name. She was being sent to serve the crown prince. The room went so silent you could hear the kitchen fire crackling. "Oh, Cheonsa," one of the older maids whispered. "Oh no." The crown prince was 24 years old and would one day be emperor. Everyone agreed he was handsome, though they did not agree on much else about him. He was tall and moved like a dancer or a swordsman, someone always aware of exactly where his body was in space. His face was the kind poets wrote about, all sharp lines and smooth skin. But it was his eyes that people talked about most. They were violet, not brown or black or even the rare dark blue some northern families carried. Violet. The color of twilight's blooming in spring, the color of the sky right before night swallowed it completely. There was an old legend that said only the true children of the Imperial bloodline would have eyes that color. But most people thought that was just a story someone made up to make the royal family seem more special than they already were. What people did not argue about was the crown prince's personality. He was, by all accounts, completely unbearable. He went through servants the way a sharp knife went through soft fruit. Quickly and without much thought. Maids who worked for him would return to the kitchen in tears, saying he barked orders like a general commanding troops. He wanted his tea at a specific temperature, his floors cleaned in a specific pattern, his clothing folded in a specific way that seemed to change depending on his mood. If you got something wrong, he would look at you with those strange violet eyes and say something so cold and cutting that you would feel it in your bones for days. No one lasted long serving him. The previous maid had quit after 3 days. The one before her had made it a week. The palace supervisor had run out of volunteers, so now she was just assigning people and hoping someone would survive. That someone was Cheonsa. "I will be fine," Cheonsa told the other maids, even though her stomach was doing uncomfortable flips. "You do not understand," another maid said. He once made a servant cry because she folded his scroll facing the wrong direction. Which direction was the right one? No one knows. That is the problem. Cheonsa took a deep breath. She needed this job. She needed the small room they gave her to sleep in, and the 2 meals a day, and the few coins they paid her each month. She had survived being an orphan, survived being different, survived years in a palace that was not built for people like her. She could survive one bad-tempered prince. She was wrong. By the end of her first week serving the crown prince, Cheonsa returned to her tiny room and cried into her blanket so the other servants would not hear. He was not cruel in the loud, obvious way. He did not throw things or yell, which somehow made it worse. He was cruel in the quiet way that made you feel small. He would look at the tea she brought and say, "This is cold," even when steam was still rising from the cup. He would run his finger along a shelf she had just cleaned and say, "Did you even try?" When she folded his clothes, he would unfold them without a word and leave them in a pile for her to do again. It was not the work that made her cry. Cheonsa had never been afraid of work. It was the feeling that nothing she did would ever be good enough, that she was wasting her effort on someone who had already decided she was worthless. The Halmiones found her crying. Cheonsa tried to hide it, wiping her face quickly and pretending she had something in her eye, but you could not lie to women who had been reading faces for 70 years. "Who did this?" the oldest Halmione demanded. Her name was Halmione Suk, and she was small enough to fit inside a wardrobe, but fierce enough to intimidate a bear. "No one," Cheonsa said. "I am just tired." "You do not cry from tired. You cry from hurt. Who hurt you?" The whole story came tumbling out. The impossible standards, the cold dismissals, the way the crown prince looked through her like she was made of glass. The Halmeones' faces went hard. "We will fix this," Halmeone Suk announced. "Please do not," Cheonsa said quickly. "I do not want to make trouble." "You did not make trouble. He did." Before Cheonsa could stop them, all 6 Halmeones marched out of her room like a tiny army going to war. Cheonsa felt her heart drop into her stomach. You did not just march into the crown prince's chambers. You requested an audience. You waited for permission. You certainly did not barge in without knocking, which is exactly what the Halmeones did. She was going to lose her job. Worse, she was going to get the Halmeones in trouble, and that thought made her feel sicker than anything the crown prince had said to her. But an hour later, the Halmeones returned. They looked satisfied in the way cats look after catching a mouse. "It is handled," Halmeone Suk said. "What did you do?" "We reminded him who he is." "And who is he?" "A boy we used to put to bed when he had nightmares." Cheonsa could not imagine the cold, sharp crown prince having nightmares or needing someone to tuck him in. But the Halmeones did not lie, especially about things like this. The next morning, when Cheonsa brought the crown prince his breakfast, he looked at her for a long moment. She kept her eyes down the way servants were supposed to. "The tea is good," he said finally. It was the same tea she always made, but she nodded and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." His voice sounded strange, like he was trying to say something kind but had forgotten how the words were supposed to fit together. Over the next few days, he continued trying. You could see the effort it took him. He would start to say something sharp, then stop himself and rephrase it in a softer way that came out awkward and stiff. It was like watching someone learn a new language, stumbling over the grammar. When she cleaned his floors, he said, "You work hard," instead of pointing out a spot she missed. When she brought his clothes, he said, "Thank you," instead of unfolding them to check. It should have made things better. In some ways it did. Cheonsa stopped crying at night, but it also made things more confusing, because now she could see that underneath the cold, Prince was someone who did not actually know how to talk to people. He only knew how to give orders. Kindness was foreign to him, and he was trying to learn it the way you might try to learn to write with your wrong hand. The palace had strict rules about eye contact. Servants did not look directly at royalty. It was a sign of disrespect, of thinking you were equal when you absolutely were not. Cheonsa had followed this rule her entire life. She could have a whole conversation with someone while looking at the floor and still know exactly what expression they were making. So she did not notice the crown prince's violet eyes watching her more and more often. She did not see the way his expression changed when she hummed her mother's song. She did not realize he had stopped reading his scrolls when she was in the room because he was paying attention to something else entirely. What she did notice was that he started asking her questions. "Where did you learn that song?" "My mother taught me, Your Highness." "Where is she now?" "I do not know. I was very young when she died." A pause. Then more quietly, "I'm sorry." Cheonsa was so surprised by the apology that she almost looked up. She caught herself just in time. Another day, while she was sweeping, he said, "You came to the palace as a child." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, Your Highness, I was 6 years old." "That must have been frightening." "Everything is frightening when you are 6. You get used to it." She thought she heard him make a sound that might have been a laugh, but when she glanced up quickly, his face was serious. The morning everything changed started like any other morning. Cheonsa entered the Crown Prince's chambers with her cleaning supplies and her soft humming. She had her back to him while she worked, scrubbing at a spot on the floor that had been bothering her for days. She was so focused on the spot that she did not hear him stand up. She did not hear him cross the room. "You reported me." His voice came from directly behind her. She jumped so hard she nearly knocked over her bucket. "Your Highness, I did not. I would never. The Halmiones, they were concerned. I did not ask them to. Please, I am so sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush. She started to stand, to run, to do something, but he was faster. He caught her arm, not roughly but firmly, and turned her around. Before she could process what was happening, she was against the wall with his arm beside her head, blocking her escape. Every part of her body screamed to look down, to follow the rules, to be a good servant who knew her place. "When I speak to you," he said, and his voice was low and dangerous, "look at me." "I cannot. Your Highness, it is not allowed, please." "I am allowing it. Look at me." She shook her head. Tears were already starting, which made her angry at herself. She did not want to cry in front of him again. He reached out with his other hand and gently, carefully tilted her chin upward. She tried to close her eyes, but he said, "Look at me, Cheonsa." He had never used her name before. She looked. His eyes were impossible. That violet color seemed to glow in the morning light coming through the window. She had never been this close to another person before, had never been looked at with this much attention. It felt like standing in front of a fire. "Do I terrify you?" The question was so unexpected that she forgot to be afraid for a moment. "Your Highness? You were crying. Do I terrify you?" There was something in his voice she had never heard before, something uncertain, something almost vulnerable, and that vulnerability cracked something open inside her. All the words she had been holding back for weeks, months, years came flooding out. "You do not terrify me," she said. "You frustrate me. You are brilliant and powerful, and you have everything anyone could ever want, and you use all of that to make the people around you feel worthless. Do you know what it is like to work as hard as you possibly can and still be told you are not enough? Do you know what it is like to be judged for things you cannot control, like the family you were born into or the skin you were born with? You walk through this palace like you are the only person in it who matters, but there are hundreds of us keeping it running. We clean your floors and cook your food and wash your clothes, and we are invisible to you. I lost my parents. I have no idea who they were or where they came from or why I look the way I do. Every single day, someone in this palace reminds me that I do not belong here. And then I come to work for you, and you remind me of the same thing in 100 different ways. So no, you do not terrify me. You just make me sad because you could choose to be kind, and you just do not." She ran out of breath. The silence that followed felt enormous. The Crown Prince stared at her. His expression was complicated, moving through surprise and confusion and something else she could not name. Then, in a motion so quick she did not see it coming, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was brief. It was startling. It was the first time anyone had ever kissed her. When he pulled back, they stared at each other in equal shock, like neither of them had planned for that to happen. Then Cheonsa's hand moved on its own. She slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the chamber like a thunderclap. A small gasp came from the doorway. They both turned. Standing in the entrance, eyes wide as full moons, was the Crown Prince's youngest sister. She was 11 years old, small for her age, with the same violet eyes as her brother. Her hand was pressed over her mouth, but you could tell she was smiling underneath it. I came to ask if you wanted to have breakfast, but I think you are busy, so I will just go now. Okay, goodbye, she said in one long rush, then turned and sprinted down the hallway. Cheonsa did not remember running. She just remembered suddenly being back in her room with the door closed and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had struck the Crown Prince. She had struck the Crown Prince. People were banished from the kingdom for less. People disappeared for less. She thought of the Halmiones who had protected her and wondered if they would be punished too. She thought of her small room and her 2 meals a day and the only home she had ever really known. She sat on her bed and tried to figure out what to do next. Sleep did not come that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. The surprise in his eyes when she slapped him. The moment before that, when he had kissed her. The vulnerability when he asked if he terrified her. She had ruined everything. Morning came too soon. Cheonsa dragged herself out of bed and got ready for work, moving slowly like someone walking toward their own execution. Maybe he would be merciful. Maybe he would just send her away instead of doing something worse. But when she arrived at his chambers, the door was locked. A guard stood outside. "The Crown Prince requests that you be reassigned," the guard said, not unkindly. "Oh? You are to report to the kitchens." It was a demotion, but it was not banishment. Cheonsa nodded and walked away on shaky legs. The kitchens were loud and hot and safe. No one would ask her questions there. She could disappear into the work. But disappearing was harder than she expected, because now every time she walked through the palace corridors, she looked for him. When she heard his voice in another room, she found herself stopping to listen. When she saw him training in the courtyard with his sword, moving through forms that looked like a deadly dance, she would hide behind the garden wall and watch. She told herself she was being careful, making sure he did not see her so she could avoid another confrontation. But that was a lie. She was watching because some part of her wanted to see him, even from a distance, even though it made no sense. 2 weeks after the incident, she was crouched behind the hedge, watching him train when a voice beside her said, "You are not very good at hiding." She screamed and jumped backwards so fast that she tripped over her own feet and landed hard on the stone path. Pain shot through her ankle. The Crown Prince was standing exactly where she had just been crouching, looking down at her with an expression she could not read. "Are you hurt?" "No," she lied, even though her ankle was already swelling. He crouched down beside her. "You are hurt. Let me see." "Please do not. I'm fine. I need to go." She tried to stand and immediately fell again. He caught her before she hit the ground. "Stop being stubborn," he said, and before she could argue, he scooped her up in his arms and started walking. "Put me down, Your Highness. People will see. This is not appropriate. Please." "I am carrying an injured servant to the physician. There's nothing inappropriate about that." "You are the Crown Prince. You should not be carrying anyone. I can walk." "You very clearly cannot walk. Stop squirming or I will drop you." She stopped squirming, mainly because she realized he was not going to listen. He carried her through the palace corridors while servants and guards stared openly. She wanted to melt into the floor, but he did not take her to the physician. He took her to his chambers. "This is extremely inappropriate," she said as he set her down on a cushion. "The physician will come here. Your ankle needs to be elevated." "Why do you even care? You had me reassigned." "I had you reassigned because you were clearly uncomfortable working for me." "Was I wrong?" She did not have an answer for that. He knelt in front of her and carefully lifted her injured ankle, placing it on a small stool. His hands were gentle. She had never seen him be gentle with anything. "I should not have kissed you," he said quietly. "No, you should not have." "You should not have slapped me." "You deserved it." His mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. Perhaps I did. The physician arrived before either of them could say anything else. She was one of the Halmionis, and her eyes went very wide when she saw Cheonsa sitting in the crown prince's chambers with him kneeling beside her. I fell, Cheonsa said quickly. I see, the Halmione said in a tone that suggested she saw much more than a simple fall. She examined the ankle, declared it badly bruised but not broken, wrapped it tightly, and gave Cheonsa instructions to stay off it for several days. Then she gave the crown prince a look that probably meant something significant, bowed, and left. You should rest here until you can walk, the crown prince said. I cannot stay in your chambers, your highness. People will talk. People always talk. Let them. Easy for you to say. You are the crown prince. I am a maid with no family name and skin that already makes people stare. If they think I am, that we are, they will make my life miserable. Something dark crossed his face. Who makes your life miserable? Give me names. It does not matter. It matters to me. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why does any of this matter to you? 2 weeks ago you had me reassigned. Now you are carrying me around and demanding names. I do not understand you. He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. The things you said to me that morning. No one has ever spoken to me that way before. I should not have. I was disrespectful. You were honest. He paused. You were also right. Cheonsa stared at him. About what? All of it. I do treat people as if they are invisible. I do use my power carelessly. I never thought about it because no one ever made me think about it. He looked at her directly, those impossible violet eyes steady and serious. I am trying to be better. It is harder than I expected. Being kind should not be hard. It is when no one ever taught you how. There was something raw in his voice, something that made Cheonsa see him differently, not as the untouchable crown prince, but as someone who had grown up in a palace full of rules and expectations, and people who bowed but never looked him in the eye. Someone who had been taught to command but never to connect. It is not too late to learn, she said quietly. Will you teach me? I am a kitchen maid with a hurt ankle. What could I possibly teach the crown prince? How to be the kind of person you do not want to slap. This time she was sure he was smiling, just a little bit. Despite everything, despite all the reasons she should not, Cheonsa smiled back. The days that followed felt different. Cheonsa stayed in the kitchens as assigned, but somehow she kept running into the crown prince in places he had no practical reason to be. He would appear in the garden when she was picking vegetables. He would walk past the kitchens during her shift. Once, he showed up at the well where servants drew water, and when someone asked why the crown prince was fetching his own water, he just stared at them until they stopped asking questions. The Halmiones noticed. They noticed everything. But they said nothing, which was more frightening than if they had scolded her. Their knowing looks followed Cheonsa wherever she went. Then the announcement came. The crown prince was officially betrothed. The entire palace buzzed with the news. The bride-to-be came from one of the oldest noble families in the kingdom, the kind of family that had land and money and a bloodline they could trace back 12 generations. Her name was Lady Min, and when she arrived at the palace with her entourage, everyone stopped to stare. She was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Perfect. Untouchable. Her hanbok was made of silk so fine it seemed to glow, embroidered with patterns that must have taken months to complete. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style held together with jade pins. Her skin was pale and smooth, her movements graceful and deliberate. She looked exactly like what a future empress should look like. Cheonsa saw her from a distance and felt something heavy settle in her chest. Of course, this was who he would marry. Of course. Lady Min traveled with a group of other noble ladies, friends and cousins who dressed almost as beautifully as she did. They moved through the palace like a flock of exotic birds, colorful and loud and taking up space in a way that made everyone else feel small. Cheonsa tried to avoid them, but the palace was only so big, and servants had to go where the work was. She was carrying a tray of tea to one of the council rooms when she heard Lady Min's voice in the corridor. Without thinking, Cheonsa ducked into an alcove to wait for them to pass. She was not afraid exactly. She just did not want to be seen. But as the group walked by, one of Lady Min's companions said, "I heard the Crown Prince personally carried a servant girl to his chambers last week. Can you imagine?" Lady Min's laugh was like wind chimes, pretty and sharp. Palace servants love to gossip. I am sure it was nothing. But they say he visits her, that he goes to places he never went before just to see her. Which servant? Lady Min's voice had changed. The prettiness was still there, but something cold had crept underneath it. The kitchen maid, the one who looks different, you know. Silence. Then, "Oh, that one. How strange." The way she said strange made Cheonsa's skin prickle. It was the same tone people had used her entire life when they wanted to say something cruel but keep their words polite. The group moved on. Cheonsa waited a full minute before she came out of hiding, her hands shaking so badly the teacups rattled on the tray. She should have known then that trouble was coming, but she was too busy trying to make herself even more invisible, picking up extra shifts in the kitchens, volunteering for the jobs no one else wanted. If she stayed busy enough, maybe she could avoid both the Crown Prince and his beautiful betrothed. It did not work. 3 days later, a palace messenger found Cheonsa in the kitchens and told her Lady Min had requested her presence in the East Garden. Every instinct Cheonsa had screamed at her to refuse, but you could not refuse a direct request from a noble woman, especially not one who was about to become the crown princess. So Cheonsa wiped her hands on her apron, smoothed her hair, and walked to the East Garden with her heart hammering. Lady Min was there with 2 of her companions, sitting on a bench near the decorative pond. The pond was not very deep, maybe up to an adult's chest, but it was pretty to look at with lotus flowers floating on the surface and ornamental fish darting beneath. "You asked to see me, my lady?" Cheonsa bowed low, eyes on the ground. "Yes. Come closer." Cheonsa took 3 steps forward. Not too close. Close enough to be respectful. "I wanted to meet you properly," Lady Min said. Her voice was pleasant, friendly even. "I have heard so much about you." "I am sure it was not very interesting, my lady. I am just a kitchen maid." "Just a kitchen maid," Lady Min repeated. "Is that all you are?" The question felt like a trap. Cheonsa kept her eyes down. "Yes, my lady." "How curious. Because I heard the Crown Prince has taken a special interest in you." "I do not know what you mean, my lady. The Crown Prince is kind to all the palace servants." One of Lady Min's companions laughed at that. The sound made Cheonsa's stomach twist. "Kind?" Lady Min said. "What an interesting word. Tell me, does he often carry other servants in his arms? Does he visit the kitchens for other maids?" "My lady, I swear to you there is nothing improper between us. He helped me when I was injured. That is all. Look at me when I speak to you." Cheonsa's head snapped up. Lady Min's face was still beautiful, but there was nothing pretty in her expression now. Her eyes were cold. "You think you are special?" Lady Min said quietly. "You think because you look different and he finds that amusing. You matter. Let me be very clear. You do not matter. You are a servant, a nameless girl with no family and no future. I am going to be his wife. I will give him children who will rule this kingdom. You will scrub floors until you are too old to stand, and then you will die, and no one will remember your name. Do you understand? Cheonsa's throat was too tight to speak. She nodded. Good. You may go. Cheonsa turned to leave, relief flooding through her. She had taken maybe 3 steps when she felt hands on her back. The push was not hard, but it was unexpected. She stumbled forward, and then there was nothing under her feet but air, and then she hit the water. The cold was a shock, but worse than the cold was the realization that she could not swim. She had never learned. Where would a palace orphan learn to swim? She went under. Her clothes were heavy, dragging her down. She kicked and flailed and managed to break the surface long enough to gasp for air, but she did not know how to stay up. Down she went again. Water filled her nose and mouth. Her lungs burned. She could hear muffled sounds from above. Voices. Were they calling for help? Or were they just watching? Her arms were getting tired. She broke the surface once more, coughing and choking, and saw people gathering at the pond's edge. So many people. Why was no one helping her? She went under again. This time she was not sure she had the strength to come back up. Then something else hit the water. Strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her upward. Her head broke the surface, and she sucked in air, coughing and crying and shaking. I have you, a voice said. His voice. I have you. Stop fighting me. The crown prince hauled her to the edge of the pond and lifted her out, then pulled himself up after her. They both collapsed on the grass, soaking wet. Cheonsa rolled onto her side and vomited pond water while he held her hair back. When she could finally breathe again, she looked up. There was a crowd, dozens of people standing in a circle, watching. And in the front, face pale with shock, was Lady Min. The crown prince stood. Water dripped from his hair and clothes. He looked at his betrothed with an expression that could have frozen the sun. You pushed her. It was an accident, Lady Min said quickly. She stumbled. I tried to catch her, but... You pushed her into water deep enough to drown in, knowing she could not swim. I did not know she could not swim. How would I know that? You knew. His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. Everyone in this palace knows servants do not learn to swim. You knew exactly what would happen. You are embarrassing yourself, Lady Min said, and some of her composure was returning. Jumping into a pond for a servant? People will talk. Let them. He turned his back on her, bent down, and scooped Cheonsa into his arms for the second time. She was too weak to protest. Her body was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. No one enters my chambers, he called out to the guards as he walked past the crowd. I do not care who asks, especially you, he added, looking directly at Lady Min. He carried Cheonsa through the palace corridors, leaving a trail of pond water. Servants pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass. No one spoke. No one dared. When they reached his chambers, he kicked the door closed behind them and set her down gently on a cushion by the fire. She was still shaking, her wet clothes clinging to her skin. You need to get warm, he said. He disappeared into another room and came back with a thick blanket and a dry robe. Change into this. I will turn around. You should not be here, Cheonsa managed through chattering teeth. People will think. I do not care what people think. You should. She is going to be your wife. No, she is not. He said it with such finality that Cheonsa stopped shaking for a moment just to stare at him. You cannot break a betrothal over this. Your father, the council, they will never allow it. My father will do what is best for the kingdom. A woman who would murder a servant out of jealousy is not fit to be empress. She will say it was an accident. Everyone will believe her. I do not care what everyone believes. I know what I saw. He looked at her, still dripping pond water, still shivering. Change your clothes before you freeze, please. He turned his back. Cheonsa changed with shaking hands, grateful for the warmth of the dry fabric. When she was done, he turned around and added wood to the fire. Thank you, she whispered, for jumping in. Did you think I would let you drown? I did not think you would notice. Something in his face cracked. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her, taking her cold hands in his. I notice everything about you, he said. Where you are, what you are doing, if you are smiling or sad. I notice when you hum that song and when you stop humming it. I notice that you tuck your hair behind your left ear when you are nervous and that you count to 3 before you knock on a door. I notice you, Cheonsa. I have been noticing you since the first day you walked into my chambers. She stared at him. Why? Because you are the only person in this palace who sees me. Not the crown prince, not the future emperor, just me. The person underneath all of it. I slapped you. You did, and I deserved it. And it was the most honest thing anyone has ever done. They sat there in the firelight, his hands still holding hers. Cheonsa knew she should pull away, knew this was dangerous, knew that everything about this was impossible. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of being invisible. You are betrothed, she said softly. Not for much longer. Your father will be angry, and then he will accept it because my betrothed will withdraw first. She is too proud to stay after being publicly rejected. Watch. By tomorrow, she will claim she realized we were not a good match and end the arrangement herself. He was right. Lady Min left the palace the next morning with her head high and her statement already prepared. The betrothal was dissolved by mutual agreement, or so the official announcement said. Everyone in the palace knew the truth, but no one spoke it out loud. Cheonsa stayed in the crown prince's chambers that night. Not because anything improper happened, though the palace would assume it did, but because he asked her to stay, and she was still shaking from nearly drowning, and she did not want to be alone. They talked through the night. He told her about growing up in the palace, about the weight of knowing your entire life was already planned before you were old enough to have an opinion about it. She told him about the orphanage, about the Halmiones, about the song her mother taught her. Somewhere near dawn, she fell asleep on the cushion by the fire. When she woke, he had covered her with another blanket and was sleeping in a chair across the room, his neck bent at an uncomfortable angle. She looked at him and felt her heart do something complicated and terrifying. This could not work. They both knew it. A crown prince and a nameless servant. The kingdom would never accept it. His father would never allow it. They had no future. But for one night, in the quiet of his chambers with the fire burning low, they had been just 2 people who had found something rare and precious and impossible. Cheonsa left before he woke up. Not because she was afraid, though fear was part of it, but because one of the Halmiones had found her 2 days earlier and told her something that changed everything. She was sick. The Halmione physician had noticed the way Cheonsa sometimes limped when she thought no one was watching, had seen her wince when she lifted heavy things, had quietly examined her and found what she feared, a bone disease. Rare and progressive. There was no cure for it, not in this kingdom, maybe not anywhere. But there was a monastery in the mountains where monks practiced ancient healing arts. They might be able to slow it down, give her more time. The Halmione had already made the arrangements. There was a caravan leaving in 3 days, right before the mountain passes closed for winter. If Cheonsa wanted to go, she had to decide now. "How long do I have if I do not go?" Cheonsa had asked. "A year, maybe 2. "And if I go to the monastery?" "I do not know, but it is a chance, the only one you have." Cheonsa had thanked her and promised to think about it, but there was nothing to think about. She could not stay in the palace dying slowly, watching him prepare to rule a kingdom while she faded. Could not ask him to care about someone who would not live long enough for it to matter. She packed the few things she owned: a spare set of clothes, the blanket from her bed, a smooth stone one of the Halmiones had given her for luck. She did not say goodbye. Goodbyes would have made it real. The morning she was supposed to leave, she woke feeling strange, dizzy and sick in a way that had nothing to do with her bones. She almost stayed, thinking she was too ill to travel. But the Halmione found her and said the caravan would not wait. So Cheonsa climbed into the covered wagon with 5 other travelers and did not look back as the palace disappeared behind the hills. She did not know she was pregnant. Would not know for another month when the monks at the monastery examined her and told her gently that her body was changing for reasons that had nothing to do with disease. She carried 3 babies. The monk who told her seemed shocked, as if 3 was unusual even for a miracle. Cheonsa laughed until she cried. Then she cried until the head monk brought her tea and sat with her until she could breathe again. "The father?" he asked carefully. "Should we send word?" "No, he does not need to know. These are his children too. He is going to be emperor. He will marry someone appropriate and have appropriate children who will rule the kingdom. I am a servant with a disease that might kill me before these babies are old enough to remember my face. What would I tell him? Come to the mountain and watch me die? Claim 3 children who will only complicate your life? No, let him go." The monk did not argue, but she saw the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that lived in her own heart. What if she was wrong? What if he would want to know? But Cheonsa had spent her whole life being practical. Practical meant protecting the people you loved from painful truths. Practical meant letting him remember her as she was, not as she would become. So she stayed in the monastery. The monks helped her in ways the palace physicians could not with medicine, but with movement and meditation and food grown in their mountain gardens. Her disease did not disappear, but it slowed. Slowly enough that she lived through the pregnancy. Slowly enough that she was there when her 3 babies were born on a cold winter morning, so identical that even she had trouble telling them apart at first. 2 boys and a girl, perfect and tiny and absolutely hers. And all 3 of them had violet eyes. She had stared at those impossible eyes and known that she could never go back, could never pretend they were anyone else's children. Those eyes were a signature, a stamp, a proclamation that she could not hide even if she wanted to. The head monk had looked at the babies and said, "Those are royal eyes." "I know." "The father?" "Yes." "He should know about this." "When they are older. When I know I will be here to protect them. Not now." She named them herself. The oldest boy was Minho, which meant brave and talented. The second boy was June, which meant talented and handsome. Her daughter, the smallest of the 3, she named Hana, which meant flower. They grew up in the monastery, wild and bright and fluent in Korean by the time they were 3. The monks doted on them. They learned to read from ancient scrolls and to fight from watching the monks train and to laugh from their mother, who made even the hardest days feel manageable. When people in the nearby village saw the children, they asked questions about their eyes. Cheonsa told them their father was from the north, from a family with unusual features. Most people accepted this. Some did not, but they kept their suspicions quiet. The children asked about their father when they were 5. Cheonsa told them he was a good man who lived far away and thought they were dead. It was not quite a lie. She had left so completely that he must have assumed the worst. "Why does he think we are dead?" Hana asked. "Because I left without saying goodbye. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." "Will we ever meet him?" "Maybe someday." Someday came sooner than she planned. The children were 9 years old, tall and bright and completely inseparable. Minho was the leader, always first to try new things. June was the thinker, asking questions the monks could not always answer. Hana was the heart, the one who noticed when someone was sad and would not rest until she fixed it. They were also, all 3 of them, exactly like their father. Bold and stubborn and absolutely convinced they were right about everything. Cheonsa watched them and saw him in every gesture. The way Minho stood with his arms crossed when he was thinking. The way June raised one eyebrow when he was skeptical. The way Hana commanded attention without even trying. It made her heart ache. By the time the children turned 9, Cheonsa could barely walk some days. The disease had been patient, but it was no longer willing to wait. The head monk told her she had months, maybe less. "You need to send them to their father," he said. "I know." "When?" "Soon." She waited until she was sure. Until she had one particularly bad day where she could not get out of bed and Hana found her and burst into tears because she thought her mother was dead. That night, Cheonsa called the children to her room. "I need to tell you something about your father," she said. They crowded around her, eyes wide. Even after all these years, they wanted to know about the mysterious man who had given them life and then disappeared. "He lives in the palace in the capital city," Cheonsa muttered, the words hurting like knives to her chest. "The palace?" Minho's eyes went huge. "Is he a guard? A scholar?" "He's the emperor." Silence. Then all 3 children started talking at once. "The emperor is our father? Why did you not tell us? Does he know about us? Can we meet him?" Cheonsa held up a hand. "I will tell you everything, but you have to listen." She told them a version of the truth, that she had worked in the palace and fallen in love with a prince, that she had to leave because she was sick and did not want to burden him, that she did not know about them until after she left, that she stayed away because she thought he would be better off without her. "That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard," Hana said. "Hana, it is. If someone I loved was sick, I would want to know. I would want to help. Your father is the emperor. He had responsibilities, a whole kingdom to think about." "But we are his children," June said quietly. "Don't we matter too?" "Of course you matter. You matter more than anything. That is why I am sending you to him now." The children looked at each other. Then Minho said, "You are coming with us." "I cannot travel that far." "Then we are not going." "You have to." "Why?" Hana's eyes were filling with tears. "Why do we have to leave you?" "Because I am dying," Cheonsa did not say. "Because I want you to know your father before I am gone. Because you deserve a future and I cannot give you one. Because he needs to meet you, and you need to meet him. I will follow when I am stronger. I promise." It was a lie, but it was a lie made of love, and sometimes that was all you had. She spent the next week preparing them. She wrote a letter to the crown prince, now emperor, pouring 9 years of silence and longing and explanation onto paper. She packed scrolls the children had drawn, hoping he would see their personalities in the pictures. She gave them small tokens to remember her by. The head monk agreed to escort them down the mountain. It would take 3 days of travel. The morning they left, all 3 children hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We will be back soon," Minho promised. "With Appa," June added. "And then we will all be together," Hana finished. Cheonsa smiled and nodded and waved as they walked down the mountain path. Then she went back to her room and cried until there was nothing left inside her. The palace had not changed in 9 years. It still sat in the valley like a jewel, its curved roofs catching the morning light. But the monk noticed something different as they approached. The gardens were perfectly maintained, but somehow lifeless. The walls were clean but cold. It looked like a palace that had forgotten how to breathe. The 3 children pressed close together as they walked toward the main gates. They had argued about this moment the entire journey down the mountain. Minho thought they should announce themselves formally. June thought they should send the letter first and wait for a response. Hana thought they should just run inside and find their father themselves. In the end, they did none of those things because the guards at the gate would not let them pass. "State your business," the head guard said. He was tall and broad and looked like he had never smiled in his entire life. "We are here to see the Emperor," Minho said, standing as straight as possible. "The Emperor does not take visitors without prior arrangement, especially not children." "We are not visitors. We are his children." The guard's expression did not change. "The Emperor has no children. Move along before I have you removed." "But we are," Hana insisted. "Our mother sent us. We have a letter." "I am sure you do. Every beggar and con artist in the kingdom has a letter claiming connection to the royal family. The answer is no. Leave." June pulled the letter from his bag and held it up. "Please, just give him this. If he reads it and says we are lying, we will leave and never come back." "I am not disturbing the Emperor with nonsense from street children." "We are not street children." Minho's voice was rising. "We came from the mountain monastery. Our mother is sick. We need to see our father. And I need you to leave before I call for reinforcements." The monk who had escorted them stepped forward. "Please, I am a servant of the mountain monastery. These children speak truth. Just look at them. Really look." "I have looked. I see 3 children making up stories. Look at their eyes." Something in the monk's voice made the guard pause. He looked at the children properly for the first time, and his face went completely white. "No," he whispered. "Yes," the monk said quietly. The children did not understand what was happening. They looked at each other in confusion. "What is wrong with our eyes?" Hana asked. "Nothing is wrong with them," the guard said. His voice sounded strange, like someone trying to talk while running. "Do not move. Do not go anywhere. I will be right back." He disappeared through the gates at a speed that seemed impossible for someone wearing armor. "That was strange," June said. "Everything about this is strange," Minho replied. They waited. Minutes passed. The other guards at the gate kept staring at them and whispering to each other. More guards appeared, then servants, then people in fancy robes who looked important. "Why is everyone looking at us?" Hana whispered. "I do not know," Minho said, "but I do not like it." Finally the gates opened, but it was not the guard who came through. It was a man in training clothes, breathing hard like he had run the entire way. He was tall and handsome and moved with the kind of grace their mother had always described when she talked about their father. His hair was longer than in the old stories, pulled back from his face. He looked older too, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting or worrying or both. And his eyes, those impossible violet eyes that matched theirs exactly. The children knew who he was before anyone said a word. "Appa," Hana breathed. The man stopped walking. He stared at them like someone had hit him very hard and he was trying to remember how to stand. Minho found his voice first. "Are you the Emperor?" The man nodded slowly, not taking his eyes off them. "Our mother is Cheonsa. She sent us to find you." Something cracked in the Emperor's face. "Cheonsa. She said you knew each other a long time ago. She said you might want to meet us." The Emperor took a step closer, then another. He crouched down so he was at their eye level. Up close they could see he was shaking. "How many of you are there?" His voice was rough, he asked as though his own eyes were deceiving him. "3. I am Minho. This is June. This is Hana. We are 9 years old. We are triplets." "Well, obviously we are triplets, you can see that, sorry. I talk too much when I'm nervous." "2 boys and a girl." "Yes. And your mother? Where is she?" The children looked at each other. Finally, June said, "She is at the monastery. She said she would come later when she was feeling stronger." "Stronger from what?" "She gets tired sometimes. The monks help her, but she said we should come meet you first." The Emperor closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they were wet. "You came all the way from the mountain monastery?" "Yes, Appa." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. "You keep calling me that." "That is what you are," Hana said simply. "You are our Appa. We practiced saying it the whole way down the mountain." "Did you?" June kept saying it wrong. He made it sound too formal. "I did not. You made it sound like a question." "Children," the Emperor said, and his voice was still shaking, but there was something almost like amusement in it. "Stop arguing for one moment." They stopped immediately. "Do you have the letter from your mother? The guard said you had one. Can I see it?" June pulled it out again, now slightly crumpled from being held so tightly. The Emperor took it with careful hands, like it was made of spider silk and might fall apart if he breathed too hard. He stood and broke the seal. The children watched as he read. They could not see his face because he had turned slightly away, but they could see his shoulders getting tighter and tighter. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. He read it once, then again, then a third time. When he finally turned back to them, his face was different, harder and softer at the same time. "How long has your mother been sick?" "Since before we were born," Minho said, "but it got worse this year." "How much worse?" The children looked at each other. They had promised their mother they would not tell him how bad it really was, but something about the way he was looking at them made lying impossible. "She could not get out of bed 3 days before we left," Hana said quietly. "She tried to hide it, but we saw." The Emperor's jaw clenched so hard they could see the muscle jump. "Where is she? Exactly where in the monastery?" "The healing wing on the east side, but Appa, she made us promise not to worry you. She said she would be fine." "She lied." The children blinked. Adults did not usually say things like that so directly. "She lied to protect you," the Emperor continued. His voice was gentler now. "Because she loves you and did not want you to be afraid. But I am going to her right now, and I am bringing physicians who might be able to help. She said the monks already tried everything. The monks are not the only healers in the world." A commotion behind them made everyone turn. An older man was pushing through the crowd, important-looking robes swirling around him. He had the same violet eyes as the Emperor, but his hair was silver and his face was lined with age. "Someone tell me why the entire palace is gathered at the gates," he demanded. Then he saw the children and stopped dead. "Grandfather," the Emperor said, "meet your grandchildren." The old Emperor stared. Then he started laughing, a big booming sound that made several people jump. 3 of them. Of course there are 3. Nothing in this family happens in small measures. He walked up to the children and looked at each of them carefully. You have his stubborn face, and his mother's smile, and eyes that prove beyond any doubt whose children you are. Welcome home. Thank you, grandfather, Hana said politely. Then quieter, you are very loud. The old emperor laughed even harder. Yes, I am. Your father is loud too when he is angry. You will see. Our mother says people who yell a lot are working through something deep inside. June offered helpfully. Does she now? She says the loudest people are often the most scared. The old emperor's smile faded a bit. He looked at his son. I like her already. Where is this wise woman who raised my grandchildren? Dying in a mountain monastery, the emperor said flatly. Well, I have been here not knowing she existed. Then what are you still doing here? Go. Father, I need physicians, the best in the kingdom. Money, supplies, horses. You will have all of it within the hour. Take whatever you need. Bring her home. The emperor looked at his children. I need you to stay here. Your grandfather will take care of you. We want to come with you, Minho said immediately. You just came down the mountain. You are tired. You need food and rest. We need our mother. The emperor knelt down again. I know, and I am going to bring her back. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The 3 children looked at each other in that way they had, communicating without words. Finally, Hana said, Yama told us you would keep your promises. She said you were stubborn and grumpy, but you always kept your word. Is that true? Yes. Then promise you will bring her home. I promise I will do everything in my power to bring her home. It was not quite the same promise, and they were smart enough to hear the difference, but it was the best they were going to get. Okay, Hana whispered. The emperor stood and started giving orders. Servants scattered in every direction. Within the hour, just as the old emperor had promised, there was a chariot ready with the fastest horses in the kingdom. Physicians from 3 different provinces were summoned. Herbs and medicines and equipment were loaded into wagons. Before he left, the emperor came back to the children one more time. Your mother wrote that I was arrogant and infuriating and made her cry in her first week working for me. That sounds about right, Minho said, which made several nearby servants try not to laugh. She also wrote that despite all of that, she loved me. Do you think that is true? She talked about you all the time, June said. She tried to pretend she did not, but we heard her. When she thought we were asleep, she would talk to the monks about you. She said you were the sunrise she wanted to share. The emperor's eyes closed. I need to go. Bring her home, Appa, Hana said. I will. I must. He climbed into the chariot and was gone before the dust settled. The old emperor looked at his 3 grandchildren standing in the palace courtyard looking lost and small. Well then, I suppose we should find you something to eat. Do you like dumplings? We have never had dumplings, Hana said. Never had? You have been living in a monastery. Of course you have not had proper dumplings. Come. We will fix that immediately. He swept them into the palace, talking the entire way about food and rooms and all the things they would need. The children followed, holding hands, trying not to think about their mother alone on the mountain. The journey back up the mountain took 2.5 days with the fastest horses. The emperor did not sleep. He could not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Cheonsa as she had been 9 years ago, bright and bold and humming that song. And then he would see her sick and dying and alone, and the guilt would choke him. When they finally reached the monastery, it was raining. Heavy sheets of water that turned the mountain path into a river of mud. The physicians wanted to wait until morning. The emperor got out of the chariot and started walking. The monastery gates were closed. He pounded on them until his fists hurt. A monk opened a small window. "We do not take visitors after dark. I am the emperor. I am here for Cheonsa. She does not wish to see you." The words hit him like a physical blow. "She sent our children to find me. She sent the children so they would have a father after she's gone. She does not want you to see her like this. I do not care what she looks like. Open the gate. No. I will break it down. It is solid oak reinforced with iron. You will only hurt yourself. Then I will wait here until she changes her mind." The monk sighed. "It is raining. I know. You will catch cold. I do not care." The window closed. The emperor sat down with his back against the gate and waited. The rain soaked through his clothes within minutes. His physicians begged him to come back to the covered chariot. He refused. Hours passed. The rain did not stop. Neither did he. Somewhere near dawn, when the rain had finally slowed to a drizzle and the emperor was shaking so hard he could barely sit upright, the gates opened. She was there. She looked so small. That was his first thought. Cheonsa had always been small, but now she looked like a strong wind might blow her away. She was leaning on a cane, her face thin and drawn, but her eyes were the same, still bright, still fierce. "You are going to die of cold sitting in the rain like a fool," she said. "Then let me inside." "Why are you here?" "Because you are here. Because our children are in the palace calling me Appa, and I did not know they existed until yesterday. Because you have been dying alone on a mountain for 9 years when you should have been with me. You were going to be emperor. You were going to marry someone appropriate. I did not want appropriate, I wanted you. You did not even know me. I knew enough. I knew you were brave enough to slap a prince. I knew you sang while you worked. I knew you saw people, really saw them, in a way no one else did. I knew that one night with you mattered more than every empty year that came after." Cheonsa's grip on her cane tightened. "You cannot fix this, I am dying. The best physicians in the monastery could not help me, neither can yours. Let them try." "Why? So you can watch me fade? So our children can watch? I wanted to spare you that. You do not get to decide that alone." His voice broke. "Please, let me try. If it does not work, if there is nothing anyone can do, at least I will know I tried. At least you will not be alone." She looked at him for a long time. The emperor who had jumped into a pond for her, who had carried her when she was hurt, who was now sitting in the rain, begging for a chance to save her. "I do not have long," she said quietly. "Days, maybe. The monks have done everything they can." "Then give me days. Give me whatever time is left." She smiled, sad and small. "You are still as stubborn as I remember. You made me cry in my first week. I think we are even." That surprised a laugh out of her, though it turned into a cough halfway through. "Come inside before you freeze." The physicians swarmed her the moment she stepped through the gates. They examined her carefully while the emperor stood close enough to touch, but far enough to let them work. Their faces grew more and more grave. Finally, the oldest physician, the one who had served the palace for 40 years, pulled the emperor aside. "There is nothing we can do. The disease has progressed too far. I am sorry." "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week if she is strong." The emperor nodded once. He did not cry. Not yet. "Make her comfortable, whatever she needs. No pain." "Yes, Your Majesty?" He went to her. She was sitting on her bed, looking tired but more peaceful than she had at the gate. "They told you," she said. "Yes." "I am sorry. Do not apologize, not for this." He sat beside her carefully, afraid he might break her if he moved too quickly. "Tell me about them, our children." So she did. She talked through the day and into the night. She told him about Minho's leadership and Jun's questions and Hana's fierce heart. She told him funny stories that made him laugh and tender stories that made his throat tight. She told him about the first time they called her Iama, and the first time they asked about their father and the 1,000 small moments that had made up 9 years. He told her about the palace, about the betrothal that had dissolved, about the years he had spent looking for her, about the moment he saw 3 children with violet eyes and knew his entire life had just changed. They talked until she could not talk anymore, and then he just held her hand while she slept. She woke once in the middle of the night and said, "The sunrise here is beautiful. Tell me about it." Golden and slow like honey spreading across the sky. "I always wanted to share it with you. Tomorrow morning, we will watch it together," he said then. She smiled and closed her eyes, but when morning came and the golden light crept across the mountains, Cheonsa did not wake up. The emperor held her hand as the sun rose without her. He held her hand as the monks came in with their prayers. He held her hand until her skin grew cold and he could not pretend anymore that she was just sleeping. Then finally, he let himself break. The physicians found him an hour later, still holding her, rocking back and forth like a child. They had to physically pull him away so they could prepare her body for the journey home. He stood outside the room while they worked, shaking and hollow. One of the monks brought him tea. He could not drink it. "She loved you very much," the monk said gently. "I was too late." "You came. That is what mattered. I should have found her sooner. I should have looked harder. She did not want to be found. You cannot blame yourself for respecting her choice." But he did blame himself. He blamed himself for every day of the 9 years they had lost. Every moment she had suffered alone. Every time their children had asked about their father, and she had to explain his absence. They built a platform in the chariot for her body, surrounding it with flowers the monks brought from their garden. The emperor climbed in beside her and did not come out for the entire journey back. When the palace finally came into view, he felt nothing. No relief, no homecoming, just the terrible weight of what he was bringing back and what he had lost. The children were waiting at the gates. They had been watching the road for 3 days. Every time a cart appeared in the distance, all 3 of them would jump up and run to the gates, only to be disappointed when it was just a merchant or a messenger. The old emperor had tried to distract them with games and lessons and the best food the palace kitchens could produce, but nothing worked. They wanted their parents. So when the royal chariot finally appeared on the road, decorated with flowers and moving slowly like it carried something precious, the children did not wait for permission. They just ran. "Appa is back," Minho shouted. "And Iama," June added, running faster. "They came together," Hana said, her voice full of joy. She kept her promise. The emperor saw them coming and climbed down from the chariot so fast he nearly fell. He held up his hands, his face desperate. "Wait, stop, please." But 3 9-year-old children running at full speed do not stop easily. Minho and June crashed into him and he caught them, holding them back with gentle force even as they tried to wriggle free. "Let us see Iama," Minho said. "We missed her." "We have so much to tell her," June added. "Grandfather fed us dumplings and they were amazing, and we have our own rooms and... Appa, why are you crying?" The emperor was crying. silent tears running down his face while he held his sons and tried to find words that did not exist. Hana had not run into her father like her brothers. She had dodged around him, quick as a fish, and was already at the chariot before anyone could stop her. She pulled herself up on the wheel and looked inside. Her mother was there, lying on a bed of flowers. She looked peaceful. She looked beautiful. She looked like she was sleeping. But Hana knew. The way children always know. The terrible knowing that happens in your heart before your mind can catch up. She climbed down slowly, turned around slowly, looked at her father and brothers with eyes that had aged 1,000 years in a single moment. "Yama is dead," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. She broke her promise. The words hit like stones. Minho and June stopped struggling. They stared at their sister, then at their father, waiting for him to say she was wrong, that it was a misunderstanding, that everything was fine. The emperor let go of his sons and dropped to his knees. He could not speak, could only nod. Minho made a sound like a wounded animal and ran to the chariot. June followed. They climbed up together and looked inside and came back down changed. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire palace had gathered to welcome the emperor home, and now they stood frozen, watching 3 children realize their mother was never coming back. Then Hana started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears streaming down her face while she stood perfectly still like she had forgotten how her body worked. The emperor pulled all 3 of them into his arms. They collapsed into him, and then they were all crying together in the middle of the palace courtyard. The emperor who never showed weakness. The 3 children who had been so brave. All of them broken and clinging to each other like the world had ended. Because in a way, it had. The old emperor watched from the palace steps with tears on his own face. He wanted to go to them, to comfort them. But this grief was not his to interrupt. So he just stood guard, making sure no one disturbed them, letting them cry for as long as they needed. It was a long time before anyone could speak. Finally, Minho pulled back and wiped his face with his sleeve. His eyes were red and swollen, but there was something determined in them. "She did not break her promise," he said. Hana looked at him. "She said she would come home. She is dead. That is a broken promise." "No, she promised she would be with us. She did not say how." "That does not make sense." "Yes, it does. Remember what she told us about her parents? How she never met them, but she felt them with her? How she said they visited her as butterflies?" June was nodding now. "She said people we love never really leave. They just change shape." "Exactly. So Yama is still with us. We just have to look differently." Minho's voice was getting stronger, more sure. "She can be the warm wind when we are training. She can be the butterfly in the garden. She can be the stars we see at night. She is everywhere now. She can finally see the sunrise she always talked about, except now she can see it from above. She has wings." It was the kind of logic only a 9-year-old could have. Beautiful and impossible and absolutely necessary. Hana thought about it. Then she said, "Do you really think so?" "I know so." Yama would not lie about something like that. If she said her parents visited her, then it is true, which means she can visit us too. "But I wanted to hug her." "Me too. But maybe this is better. Now she is not sick anymore. She does not hurt. She can go anywhere and see everything, and she will always, always be watching us." The emperor listened to his son and felt something crack open in his chest. Not more pain, though there was still plenty of that, but also something else. Something like light. "Your mother would be very proud of you," he said quietly. Minho looked at him. "Are you proud of us?" "Yes." more than I can say. Then that is enough. For now. The old emperor finally came down from the steps. He looked at his son, then at his grandchildren, then at the chariot with its burden of flowers and grief. "We will give her a burial worthy of an empress," he announced. "The entire kingdom will know what she meant to this family." "But she was not an empress," June said. "She raised 3 royal children alone while dying of a disease that would have broken most people. She loved your father when he was at his worst. She gave up everything to protect you. That is more empress than most women who wear the crown." The preparations took 3 days. They built a platform in the palace's most beautiful garden, the one where flowers bloomed year-round and cherry trees dropped petals like pink snow. They dressed Cheonsa in robes of deep blue silk, embroidered with silver stars. They placed her favorite things around her. The children added drawings they had made. The emperor added a letter he wrote but could not read out loud. The Halmeones came. All 6 of them, ancient and fierce and crying openly. They had loved Cheonsa when she was a little orphan, and loved her still now that she was gone. They stood by the children throughout the ceremony, a wall of protective grandmothers making sure the grief did not swallow them whole. People came from all over the kingdom, servants who remembered the kind maid who hummed while she worked, merchants who had sold goods to the monastery and met the cheerful woman with 3 wild children, monks who had cared for her in her final years. The emperor stood at the front with his children on either side and spoke to the assembled crowd. "This is Cheonsa," he said. "She was a palace maid, an orphan with no family name, the mother of my children, the woman I loved and lost and never stopped looking for. She was braver than any soldier I've known, kinder than any noble born to privilege, stronger than anyone should have to be. And she is gone." His voice cracked. Hannah took his hand. He squeezed it gently and continued. "My children tell me she is not really gone, that she is in the wind and the butterflies and the stars. I am trying to believe them. It is hard. But I will try, because trying is what she would want." He paused, looking at the crowd, at the nobles in their fine clothes, and the servants in their simple ones, and the monks in their robes, and the Halmeones with their fierce eyes. "Some of you will think it strange that I grieve so deeply for a servant. Some of you will say it is inappropriate. Some of you will gossip about it in your fine houses and judge me for showing this much feeling over someone with no title and no name." His voice grew harder. "I do not care. She mattered. She matters still, and I will make sure no one ever forgets her." He turned to the head priest. "Perform the ceremony." "Which ceremony, Your Majesty?" "The wedding ceremony." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The old emperor raised his eyebrows but did not object. The children looked at their father in confusion. "You cannot marry someone who is dead," June whispered. "There is a ceremony for it, a ghost wedding. It is rare, but it is allowed." "Why would you do that?" "Because I should have married her when she was alive. Because I want the world to know she was mine and I was hers. Because your mother deserves to be recognized as what she was, the empress of my heart, even if she never wore the crown." The priest performed the ceremony. It was strange and beautiful and deeply sad. The emperor knelt beside Cheonsa's still form and spoke vows to someone who could not hear them. He placed a ring on her cold finger. He bowed to her as a husband bows to his wife. When it was done, he stood and faced the crowd again. "I vow before all of you that I will take no other wife. I will have no other children. These 3 are my legacy and hers. I will raise them to be worthy of the mother who gave them everything. And when I die, I will be buried beside her so that in death we can finally be together the way we should have been in life." The old emperor stepped forward. "Witnessed and accepted. Let it be recorded in the palace records. Cheonsa, wife of the emperor, mother of the royal heirs." They burned incense and sang prayers and said goodbye in all the ways the kingdom knew how. When the sun set, they lowered her into the ground in the garden she would have loved, where flowers grew and children played and life continued, even in the shadow of death. The children each placed something in the grave before they covered it. Minho placed a smooth stone he had carried from the monastery. June placed a drawing of their family, all 5 of them together. Hana placed a flower and whispered something no one else could hear. That night, the 3 children slept in their father's room, curled up together like puppies. The emperor sat by the window and watched the stars and tried to believe his son was right, that she was out there somewhere, that love did not end just because breathing did. A butterfly landed on the windowsill, white with blue edges. It sat there for a long moment, wings opening and closing slowly, then flew away into the night. The emperor watched it go and felt the smallest bit of peace. The years that followed were hard. Grief did not disappear just because you wanted it to. There were days when the children cried for no reason. Days when the emperor could barely get out of bed. Days when the whole palace felt too heavy to bear. But there were also good days. Days when Minho told a joke that made everyone laugh. Days when June asked a question so clever it made the tutors smile. Days when Hana did something kind for a servant and the emperor saw Cheonsa's heart living on in their daughter. Slowly, carefully, the palace came back to life. 3 years after Cheonsa's death, the palace was unrecognizable from the cold, silent place it had been before the children arrived. The triplets were 12 now, tall and lean and absolutely unstoppable. They had their mother's warmth and their father's intensity and a confidence that came from being loved completely by everyone around them. Every morning, the emperor trained with his sons in the courtyard, and every morning Hana would show up with her own practice sword. "You should be learning music and poetry," the emperor said for the 100th time. "I know music and poetry. I also want to know how to fight." "Fighting is not appropriate for a princess." "Why not?" "Because it is dangerous." "So is being a princess. At least if I can fight, I can protect myself." She had him there. The emperor sighed and tossed her a practice sword. "Fine. But if you complain that it is too hard, you have to stop." "I never complain. You complained yesterday that your calligraphy teacher was boring." "He was boring. He spent an hour talking about one brushstroke. One." Minho and June laughed. The emperor tried not to smile and failed. The training session was chaos. Hana was smaller than her brothers, but faster, and she had figured out that speed could beat strength if you were smart about it. Minho fought like their father, all precision and control. June fought like he was solving a puzzle, trying different approaches until he found one that worked. The emperor watched them and felt his heart do that complicated thing it always did. Pride and pain mixed together. Pride because they were extraordinary. Pain because Cheonsa was not there to see it. But then a white butterfly landed on the fence beside the training ground, and he remembered what Minho had said 3 years ago. "She is everywhere. We just have to look differently." After training, the children scattered. They never stayed in one place for long. The palace had learned to expect them everywhere. In the kitchens, stealing snacks. In the library, reading scrolls they were probably too young for. In the gardens, playing with the children of servants, treating them like equals because no one had ever taught them to do otherwise. The old emperor loved to tell the story of the time a visiting noble had scolded Hana for playing with a servant's child. She had looked at the noble with her father's cold eyes and said, "Are you telling me who I can be friends with?" In a voice so icy the noble had actually backed up a step. "She is her father's daughter," the old emperor would say, laughing. "Terrifying when she wants to be. But she was also her mother's daughter. Kind to servants, generous with her time, quick to notice when someone was sad and determined to fix it. They all were. One afternoon, a palace maid dropped a tray of dishes and started crying because she thought she would be punished. June had been walking by. He stopped, helped her clean up the mess, and then went to his father and asked for a new set of dishes to replace the broken ones. "Why?" the emperor asked. "Because she was afraid. No one should be afraid of making a mistake." The emperor had given him the dishes and thought about a long-ago conversation with a maid who had told him he made people feel worthless. He was trying to be better. His children were helping him remember how. The palace staff adored the triplets. They brought life and noise and laughter to places that had been quiet for too long. And yes, sometimes they caused problems. Like the time they decided to reorganize the library by color instead of subject, and it took the scholars a week to fix it. Or the time they snuck out to the market and came back with a puppy they promised to take care of themselves. The puppy was now massive and slept in the emperor's chambers, so that promise had not quite worked out. But the emperor did not mind. The palace felt full in a way it never had before. On the evening of their 12th birthday, the children were supposed to be sitting quietly in the throne room while their father met with advisors. They were not sitting quietly. They were crowded onto the throne itself, all three of them, whispering and giggling about something. The emperor walked in and stopped. "What are you doing?" "Sitting on the throne," Hannah said innocently. "I can see that. Why?" "We wanted to see what it felt like." "And?" "It is uncomfortable. How do you sit here for hours?" "Practice. Get down." "In a minute. We are discussing something important." "Discuss it somewhere else." "But we look very official here," Minho argued. "Very royal." "You look very much like you were about to be in trouble." June grinned. "Appa would not punish us on our birthday." "Appa absolutely would. But then we would be sad. Do you want us to be sad?" It was manipulation of the worst kind, and they all knew it. The emperor tried to look stern, failed completely. "Off the throne. Now." They did not move, just looked at him with matching violet eyes and matching innocent expressions. The emperor crossed the room in 3 strides, reached out, and tickled all 3 of them simultaneously. The effect was immediate and chaotic. They shrieked and scrambled and tumbled off the throne in a tangle of limbs and laughter. The palace guards at the door tried very hard to maintain their serious expressions and mostly failed. "Dinner is ready," the emperor said. "Go, before I change my mind about birthday presents." "We get presents?" Hannah's eyes went wide. "Of course you get presents. Now go." They scrambled toward the dining hall, pushing and shoving each other in that way siblings do. The emperor followed more slowly, listening to their laughter echo through the palace corridors. At dinner, they were loud and messy and absolutely impossible. They talked over each other. They stole food from each other's plates. They told stories that made the old emperor laugh so hard he started coughing. The emperor watched them and felt something close to happiness. Not the simple happiness of before, when he did not know what loss felt like, but the complicated happiness of after. The kind that knew joy could exist alongside grief, that laughter could live in the same heart as sorrow. After dinner, they went to the garden where Cheonsa was buried. It had become tradition. Every birthday, every important day, they would visit her. The grave was covered in flowers now. The servants kept it beautiful because they knew it mattered to the children. A cherry tree had grown beside it, probably from a seed that had blown in on the wind. The children liked to think their mother had sent it. "Hello, Yama," Hana said, sitting down beside the grave. "We are 12 today. Can you believe it?" Minho sat beside her. "Appa gave us swords, real ones, not practice ones." "I asked for books," June added. "I got 12, one for each year." They sat there in the fading light and talked to her, told her about their day, their training, their plans. The Emperor stood back and listened. He had learned not to interrupt these moments. They needed this. He needed it too. When the stars started to come out, Hana said, "I wish you were here." "She is here," Minho said automatically. "I know, but I mean really here, so we could hug her." "Me too," June said quietly. The Emperor came and sat down with them. "I wish that too, every single day." "Do you think she knows?" Hana asked. "That we love her?" "Yes. How can you be sure? Because love that strong does not disappear. It just changes shape, like her." A white butterfly landed on the gravestone, then another, then a third. They sat there, wings moving slowly like they were breathing. "See?" Minho whispered. "She knows." They sat together until the moon rose and the night grew cold. The butterflies eventually flew away, but the feeling they left behind stayed. As they walked back to the palace, Hana slipped her hand into her father's. "Appa?" "Yes?" "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. He thought about it carefully. "Not the way I imagined being happy, but yes. You three make me happy." "Good. Because you make us happy too, even when you are grumpy." "I am not grumpy." "You are absolutely grumpy," June said. "Extremely grumpy," Minho agreed. "The grumpiest," Hana finished. The Emperor looked at his three children, their faces lit by lantern light, their eyes bright with mischief and love. They were so much like their mother it hurt. But it was a good hurt, the kind that reminded him what he had, not just what he had lost. "Fine. I am grumpy, but I am your grumpy father and you are stuck with me." "We would not want anyone else," Hana said seriously. They reached the palace and the children ran ahead to their rooms, already arguing about something new. The Emperor stood in the courtyard and listened to their voices carrying through the halls. The palace was full of noise again. The right kind of noise. The kind that came from being loved and loving in return. The kind that meant home. A servant called the children for their evening tea. They ignored her, too absorbed in whatever they were doing. The Emperor smiled and went to collect them himself. When he reached their room, they were building something elaborate out of scrolls and cushions, deep in concentration. "What is this?" he asked. "A fort," Minho said. "I can see that. Why?" "Because we wanted to." It was the same answer for everything they did. Because we wanted to. Because it seemed fun. Because why not? He thought about the palace he had grown up in, the rules and restrictions and the constant weight of expectation. Then he looked at his children, free and wild and exactly who they were meant to be. "Dinner's ready," he said. "We are not hungry." "You are always hungry, come on." They groaned but followed, abandoning their fort for food. As they walked through the palace, they talked and laughed and filled every space with their presence. The Emperor walked behind them, watching. Remembering a maid who had hummed while she worked, who had slapped him for being cruel, who had given him 3 perfect children and then slipped away before he could thank her properly. But she had left him this, them. Loud, impossible, beautiful them. And that was enough. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the palace had settled into quiet, the emperor sat by his window and looked at the stars. "They are growing up well," he said to the darkness. "You would be proud. They have your kindness, your bravery, your absolutely stubborn refusal to do what they are told." A breeze came through the window, warm and gentle. "I miss you. I will always miss you. But I understand now what Minho said. You are not really gone. I see you every day in them, in Hana's smile, in June's questions, in Minho's fierce protection of his siblings. You are everywhere." The breeze touched his face like a hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "For them. For the time we had. For teaching me what love actually means. I will take care of them. I promise. They will grow up knowing they were wanted, knowing they mattered, knowing their mother loved them enough to give up everything." A white butterfly landed on the windowsill. It sat there for a long moment, then flew off into the night sky. The emperor watched it go and felt, for the first time since she died, something close to peace. The palace slept around him. His children dreamed in their rooms. The guards walked their routes. The servants rested. The kingdom breathed in the darkness, safe and whole. And somewhere in the wind and the stars and the space between heartbeats, Cheonsa smiled. Her children were loved. Her emperor had kept his promise. And the palace that had once been so cold was warm again, filled with laughter and life and all the things she had wanted for them. She had given them everything. And in return, they had given her this, a home that would never forget her. Children who would carry her forward, a love that refused to die even when she had. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let me know what story you want to see next.